Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, has often been portrayed as a champion of reason, but he held a rather dim view of democracy. Now, before you jump to conclusions, let's unpack this a bit. Socrates lived in Athens during a time when democracy was a relatively new concept. The city-state was still figuring out how to govern itself, and while democracy was revolutionary, it was also messy and chaotic. Socrates saw things that made him uneasy, and today, I want to explore why he was skeptical of the democratic system. First off, let's consider the context. Athens had a direct democracy, which means that citizens themselves voted on laws and policies rather than electing representatives. Sounds great, right? But here's the catch. The definition of citizen was pretty narrow. Only free men born in Athens had a say. Women, slaves, and foreigners, they were completely excluded. So Socrates looked around and saw a society that claimed to be democratic, but was fundamentally flawed. He believed that the voices of the most vulnerable and marginalized were silenced, and this didn't sit right with him. He valued the pursuit of truth and knowledge, and he couldn't help but feel that a system that excluded so many couldn't possibly lead to the best outcomes for society as a whole. Now, let's talk about the people who did have a voice. Socrates was deeply concerned about the general populace's qualifications to make informed decisions. He famously said that the unexamined life is not worth living, which implies that people should engage in critical thinking and self-reflection. But in a democracy, he saw a lot of uninformed opinions being thrown around. He worried that many citizens were more interested in popularity than in truth. Imagine a situation where decisions are made not based on rational debate but on the whims of the crowd. It's like a popularity contest, and we all know how that can go awry. Socrates believed that the masses were easily swayed by rhetoric and emotions rather than grounded in reasoned arguments. He thought that this could lead to poor decision-making, and in his eyes, that was a dangerous path to tread. Socrates also had a particular disdain for demagogues, those charismatic leaders who could manipulate the masses. He understood that democracy could give rise to individuals who would exploit the system for their own gain. These leaders would appeal to the emotions and fears of the people, promising them everything they wanted while ignoring the complexities of governance. Socrates saw this as a recipe for disaster. He believed that the true role of a leader should be to guide the people toward wisdom, not to pander to their basest desires. In a democracy, he felt that the loudest voices often drowned out the wisest ones, and that could lead to a society making choices that were ultimately self-destructive. Another point to consider is Socrates' belief in the importance of expertise. He thought that certain matters, especially those involving governance, required a level of knowledge and skill that the average citizen simply didn't possess. He was a firm advocate for the idea that the most qualified individuals should lead rather than leaving it up to the whims of the masses. In his mind, democracy often meant that decisions were made by those who were least equipped to make them. It's like letting someone who has never flown a plane take the controls just because they happen to be popular. That's not just reckless, it's dangerous. Socrates believed that wisdom and expertise should guide society, not mere popularity. Now, let's not forget Socrates' own fate. He was ultimately sentenced to death by the Athenian democracy, convicted on charges of corrupting the youth and impiety. Here was a man who dedicated his life to questioning and seeking truth. Yet he was silenced by the very system that claimed to uphold freedom and justice. This experience only solidified his skepticism. He saw firsthand how democracy could turn against those who challenged the status quo. In his case, it wasn't the majority who were right. It was the majority who were afraid of dissent. Socrates' trial serves as a chilling reminder of how democracy can be weaponized to stifle free thought and expression. But let's take a moment to relate this to our own lives. How often do we see decisions being made based on popular opinion rather than informed debate? Social media, for instance, is a double-edged sword. While it empowers voices that might have been silenced, it also amplifies misinformation and emotional responses. We live in a world where a tweet can sway public opinion, and sometimes that opinion is based on half-truths or outright lies. Socrates' concerns about democracy resonate today as we navigate a landscape filled with noise and distraction. So, what can we take away from Socrates' critique of democracy? It's not that he was entirely against the idea of democratic governance, rather, he was advocating for a more thoughtful, informed approach to decision-making. He wanted citizens to engage in critical thinking, to question their beliefs, and to seek out knowledge. In a way, he was calling for a democracy that was more than just a system of voting. He envisioned a society where the pursuit of truth was at the forefront of public discourse. In conclusion, Socrates' skepticism of democracy stems from a profound concern for the quality of governance and the welfare of society. He believed that true democracy should be rooted in reason, wisdom, and a commitment to the common good. As we reflect on his ideas, let's challenge ourselves to seek knowledge, to engage in meaningful dialogue, and to be critical of the systems we participate in. After all, the essence of democracy lies not just in the act of voting, but in the commitment to being informed, engaged citizens who value truth and understanding above all else.